Firan, as we approach the hour of going home to Darkon, I fear that I'm not sure if you're ready.
To be entirely honest, Caden, I'm not.
I feared that you might say that. That is why I think it would be best if we tried looking back into your past by examining your memories through Echo.
Is this wise? Is this even necessary?
Yes, and even though my understanding of metaphysics is rather limited, I have theorized that if perhaps witnessing your past and asserting your own will, your own personality, you might be able to gain the strength needed to not fall back into the core. It's a bit of a risk to myself and you, but I think it'll be worth it.
The toll it takes upon you, though.
I am fully aware. But I need this. I need to know when we go back to Darkon, when we go back home, that you won't simply just fade away, and I won't have to go confront Azalin and see your eyes and be the one to drive my sword into your belly. I cannot do that after everything we've gone through, after all the long nights, after all the many conversations we've had, deep conversations. You are everything I ever wanted for a father, and I could not bear the burden losing you.
I understand. Very well. If you're truly willing to pay the price for this, then I suppose we should get this over with.
Though I dress like an idiot, do not worry, I have made preparations to make this somewhat bearable. Come, follow me. Viken is waiting for us.
Hey, I know what's waiting for you both. Be careful. Both of you.
I am aware, Viken. Thank you.
What is all this?
Well, the bottles, elixirs of pain tolerance. As I said, prepared for this moment. I am fully aware of the burden that this is going to be on me, but I would rather make the pain less than is necessary. As for the circle, in my readings, I've been told that it helps give a cast of focus. So, just follow me to sit down in the middle of it and we can get started. Just like in Barovia, I need you to take my arm and close your eyes. Think only about who you are, your past, your son, Azalin. Let those be your sole focus at the moment. Think of nothing else. There can be no distractions in this. Otherwise, Echo might come. I do not want his intrusion on this matter, for he might, like in Remuli, pollute our task. Very well. Let us do this then. Groping for corner markers and other guiding signs delayed them, as did the need to evade city patrols. Each time the brothers escaped a watch squad's notice, 12-year-old Firan Zal'honan shivered and smothered a nervous giggle. 15-year-old Firan, however, treated each near miss as a triumph. Finally, no longer able to contain his elation, he laughed openly.
Firan, shh,
the younger warned, his heart in his throat.
Calm yourself, little brother,
Firan said, his voice filled with elation.
There is nothing to worry about. No patrol can discover us. We were less than an arm's length from that last group of fools, and they walked right past us. How fortunate for Noel's honest citizens that you and I are not evildoers. We could fill our pockets 100 times over, and those simpletons would never find us.
Eric protested in a hoarse whisper.
You are unfair. This alley is as black as pitch. No one could have seen us in this hiding place, and we made no sound for them to hear.
True,
but that alone was not why they passed us by,
Firan said smugly. Then, despite the tenseness of the moment and the urgency of the night's mission, he smiled.
Such generosity, even toward witless patrolmen, was so typical of Eric, and but one of many reasons that the youngest son of Earl Hermit Zal'honan was beloved by all. Firan's tone was gentler as he went on. And you, little brother, soul of kindness that you are, always forgive the stupidities of others.
I forgive them for being human, as I hope the gods will forgive me someday when I go to their judgment.
Firan grimaced. What pious nonsense is this? Neither of us will face death for long years to come, and with skill and cunning, we may avoid it entirely. Immortals can be bargained with, or tricked outright, you know. And for both our sakes, I intend to outwit them and their grim judgments exactly as we have outwitted the patrols. Eric gasped.
Great Istis protect you. Do not blaspheme and challenge fate.
However, no matter how earnest the prayer, there was an undercurrent of awed admiration for his brother's courage. Firan spat on the cobbles. I need no goddess's protection. I make my own, with potent and unbreakable spells. The wards reminded him of their appointment, and he tugged demandingly at Eric's arm, leading him the way once more as they emerged from the darkened alley and hurried down the narrowing street. Eric muttered anxiously,
What if Father or Renaud?
Do not worry about them. In Father's mind we are safe abed, and our elder brother's eyes are only good for finding the larder. There was both certainty and scorn in Firan's statement, and he chuckled as he imagined their father's reaction tomorrow. When the Earl learned that Firan had disobeyed his commands yet again, and lured young Eric along with him on the night's escapade, Hermit and Jester wrath would be explosive and futile. The prospect delighted Firan, adding spice to the night's adventure, as if it needed more. The boys eluded more patrols, their father's own patrols, with ever-increasing ease, and Firan's confidence became arrogance. They were in the clear now, almost there. He longed to shout defiance at the sky, warning the stars to beware. For tonight, Firan Zal'honan stood upon the threshold of greatness. A new master of the arcane arts would be born with the casting of the great summoning spell. By tomorrow night, he would be powerful enough to rip those bright orbs from the heavens and wear the very stars as his crown. How his father would rave and bellow when that happened. The old man's boring, familiar litany of warning rang in Firan's thoughts.
Sorcery is a curse on the land, son. A curse! If only I were able, I would wipe that blight from North forever. I would without hesitation or regret banish its foul practitioners, burn their obscene tomes and grimoires, and smash their wizard's paraphernalia. Smash it to splinters beyond even their powers to restore. Shun that curse as if your life depended on it, or most assuredly, someday it will.
Firan pictured himself choking off his father's voice with a single gesture, needing to cast only the tiniest of spells from among the new wizard's vast arsenal to accomplish that insignificant yet monumentally satisfying deed. And then, the old man would be forced to bow to his scorned second son, and to that son's formerly unappreciated, abhorred talents. Matters were going to change at Castle Zal'honan, and change drastically. Soon. Eric's soft voice broke into Firan's vindictive fantasies.
Are you sure your friend will not resent my joining your secret rituals tonight?
Secret rituals? Ah, you mean the magic, the summoning. The older boy savored the words as he might a delicious viand. Why do you ask? Surely you have not decided that you are, after all, afraid?
Oh no,
Eric said, almost too quickly, betraying the unspoken dread of being thought childish, or worse, a coward.
After all,
he went on in what he hoped was a devil-may-care tone.
If we never take a risk, we are never truly alive. Or so it is written by a most prominent philosopher. Tutor has shown me those very words more than once in his favorite scroll.
The boy chuckled self-consciously.
Of course, philosophers are said to spend most of their lives in libraries, and the only risks they take are those of catching cold when they venture down drafty castle corridors in search of ever more ancient tomes.
Sobering, Eric returned to his original concern.
I only fear that I might be intruding on something private, something that you and Corsalis alone should share.
Amused, Firan reassured him. Corsalis insists you join us. So do I, in fact. It is imperative you do so. I explained the reasons earlier. I thought you had agreed.
I did. I do. It all sounds so exciting. But I would not want to be merely little brother one more time, hanging at your heels and bothering you with my presence assigned a task that has neither meaning nor import.
That statement was a poignant echo of pattern shaped throughout Eric's 12 short years, pattern shaped living in a clever older brother's enormous shadow. The boy was pathetically eager to share on Firan's forbidden adventures in exotic locales. You will not bother me, I promise. And your task has both meaning and import. You will be an essential participant, no less so than I.
Firan glanced affectionately at the slender, shadow-cloaked form by his side. Even in this dark, stench-filled alley, Eric's sunny good nature seemed to hold the night at bay. Firan tousled his brother's mop of golden curls and said,
Just remember to obey my commands without question. Stay strictly within the lines I will draw, and once things truly begin, stand fast no matter what you may behold,
Whether it be minions of light or evil's worst demons.
Eric recited, repeating part of a terrible oath Firan made him swear before they left the castle.
I will obey.
Good. Place your trust in me. My magic and Corsalis's are powerful enough to bind securely anything we summon.
Anything?
You doubt my word?
Firan asked sternly. Ben relented as the boy tried to stammer an apology.
No more chatter, little brother. The time grows short. We must hurry.
It's more intense than I thought.
That was not as intense as I thought it was going to be. Are you alright?
Yeah. Why wouldn't I be?
You're bleeding.
Am I? So soon? But No, it's fine. It's fine.
We don't need to press on any further if you cannot handle it.
No, I'm fine. Just take my arm again. God, why does this elixir have to at least burn my throat? Corsalis was huddled over a large, age-worn book, frowning with concentration, his lips moving silently as he read. At the brother's entry, he glanced up and said curtly,
You are late. I had begun to think your nerve had failed. Never doubt me, Corsalis,
Firan said, bristling slightly.
I told you we would be here before midnight, and I have not yet heard the watch called at this hour.
He and Eric shrugged off their cloaks as the older boy continued.
Our father's scrutiny was more strict than usual this night, and his patrols seemed overly numerous in the streets, so we were slowed a bit. It takes some small time to produce even such minor illusions as were required.
Startled surprise.
So that is how. I wondered why father failed to note our leaving, even when those gate hinges squeaked like 100 hungry rats.
Firan smiled in acknowledgement of his brother's tribute of amazement, but said nothing. Corsalis carefully closed and locked the ancient tome he had been reading and placed it atop a precarious pile of similar volumes.
Stand there,
Firan instructed, pointing to one of the marks. Eric gulped, but, faithful to his promise, obeyed without question. The older youths moved on to the other two marks. The self-taught wizard chanted while clouds of incense and shadows gathered over the circle. Soon, Eric blinked back tears and swallowed coughs amid dense smoke. His companions seemed oblivious to its irritations, for they were now totally immersed in their spell-casting. Occasionally, Firan fell silent, and Corsalis alone pronounced key phrases learned from the ancient books. At such times, the young sorcerer endured deep frustration, fearful his colleague might not have memorized the words correctly, and if Corsalis misspoke during a crucial stage of the summoning. At long last, when the boys were nearly exhausted by the ritual and the intense concentration it required, when the final invocation itself had been pronounced at least a dozen times, the tiny mummy seemed to move. But it was not the Shashik. They realized a moment later. It was the air around the Shashik. A shadow, not opaque like the ones that still hovered in the rafters above them, but gray and translucent, had formed, giving the air a distorting thickness. The two sorcerers, despite their exhaustion, redoubled the intensity with which they proclaimed their invocation, visualized with even more clarity the creature they were now certain was approaching and the opening through which it would come. The opening that was forming even now, obscuring and distorting the image of the Shashik until they felt as if their eyes were being physically twisted in their sockets. Then, in the space of a single heartbeat, icy cold filled the hut. An opening. And all around that opening, where the rough wooden flooring now came to an end, the translucent, distorting shadows blossomed. Like a wall of flickering gray flames, the shield without which they would be at the mercy of whatever emerged. It would hold the creature at bay until the words would. A primitive part of Firan's brain convulsed with fear, but another part, that of the self-taught sorcerer, exulted. The ritual had been successful. They had proven that the ancient tomes were genuine and their spells still effective. And they themselves were capable of wielding them. And then, it appeared. Writhing like the shadowy smoke that surrounded it, it formed above the opening into nothingness, hovering. There was no solid form, only a shimmering dark aura, an overwhelming stench of pure malevolence. Corsalis shouted frantically, spitting magical words like the arrows of a master archer in full battle, rapid-fire stance. The alien thing probed, thrusting against the translucent wall of distortion they had woven to contain it. Even through the wall, Firan felt its awesome power pulsing as it pushed hard against his breast, as strong as a physical touch, leaden with the bite of a killing cold. Abruptly, someone was screaming. No, 3 someones. The voice of 3 boys united in helpless fear.
Too strong! Too strong!
Corsalis was shrieking.
I cannot hold it! The words are not right! They are not enough!
The nightmare Firan had dreaded had come true. They had pierced the veil, summoning an abomination they had, in their arrogance, thought they could control. And now the only one of them who had studied the words of power that could hold and bind this monster that pressed against them through the weakening protective shell. This monster that burned with an unquenchable hunger for living flesh. Searching his memory for any protective spell to buttress the one that was failing, Firan, in his desperation, managed to dredge up what seemed like a miracle. Screaming the words, flinging his hands high, he gestured wildly. The pressure against his chest eased fractionally, then withdrew a man's pace. The movement within the seething thing became violent, resembling the mindless rage of a maddened beast. He lunged, striking, and was gone. Smoke vanished, as did the ominous shadows. The candle flames fluttered wildly, dancing in a blast of unnatural wind. Through no air stirred within the hut. Slowly the flames steadied, and the world once again came into focus. Corsalis stood where he had at the start, as did Firan. He could scarcely believe they were alive. Limp with relief, Firan turned to Eric. For a moment it seemed that all was well. Eric had stood his ground as he had promised he would. The boy smiled through his lingering terror, a question in his eyes. But even as Firan welcomed the sight of the boy, he saw something else. Eric had been enveloped by the protective wall of grey distortion. Somehow he had been pulled inside, and something not of their world, something that sent an icy jolt of terror through Firan's entire body, had appeared. A shadow, thicker and more malignant than the ones that had hovered in the rafters from the start of their efforts, was forming around the boy, cloaking him from head to foot. And as it formed, tendrils of even deeper shadow formed and swirled inward to touch the boy. And the shadow for just a moment took on a face, a demonic face of pure evil. And then it began to fade, but not because it was departing. Instead, Firan realized with new horror it was seeping slowly but inexorably into the boy.
Firan?
Eric's voice trembled. The terror that had begun to fade was returning, and the sound of his voice was as distorted as the light emerged from within the protective shell.
It's all right, little brother,
Firan managed to say, knowing that he lied. Without warning, the boy's muscles spasmed, and he dropped into a bestial crouch, a startled cry erupting from his throat at the sudden, involuntary movement. Firan gasped as the boy's skin, once as pure as the youngest child's, took on the grayish hues of ashes. His hair, tousled golden blonde, coarsened and stiffened but retained the tousled form. His fingers remained fingers but crooked unnaturally, as if whatever was trying to control them were more accustomed to talons. And the eyes. Firan's stomach seemed to congeal into cold lead. The eyes, once the softest blue, were bloodshot red, and yet... It was Eric who peered out of them, terrified, his whimper becoming guttural with each passing moment. The boy tried to straighten. His crouching body tried to reach out to Firan, but the creature within was already too powerful.
No!
Firan roared, rushing toward Eric, but Corsalis was suddenly between them, seizing Firan and holding him fast. As he had not held the summoned one back, cursing, Firan lunged to Corsalis' throat.
This is your doing. Your doing. If you had not failed... Firan, help me!
A hoarse parody of the child's voice penetrated Firan's rage, and the rage shattered into grief and horror, almost driving Corsalis out of his mind. The Nyrondese, taller and heavier, pinned Firan's arms and shook him bodily, shouting directly into his face.
It was not my fault alone, Zal'honan. Both of us failed. Do you not understand your own error?
He shook Firan harder, emphasizing the accusations with brute strength. Stunned by the physical onslaught, Firan protested.
I made no error. Every syllable I uttered was precise and true.
Corsalis' expression was cold with contempt.
More than words are required. Have you not realized that simple truth? Your thoughts must be even more rigorously controlled than your tongue, for they are the key.
The spoken words are no more than means of focusing those thoughts, those images that realize the powers we summon up.
But my thoughts were...
Your thoughts were muddled and imprecise. I heard it in the words you spoke. The syllables may have been as precise and true as you claim, but their feel, their intonations were terribly wrong. I may have failed to restrain the creature, but it is you who turned it away from yourself and directed it to your brother. It is you who condemned him to a living hell.
Corsalis released his steely grip on Firan and stepped back a pace.
The mighty sorcerer, vaunted middle son of Earl Zal'honan,
The Nairondi said, sneering angrily.
Arrogant fool, instead of banishing the creature, your thoughts were only of saving yourself. And with those thoughts you made it possess not you, but someone, anyone else!
Firan blanched, while behind him the thing that had been Eric whimpered piteously, gutturally.
So you see,
Corsalis pressed on mercilessly.
you are at least as much to blame for what happened here as I.
Firan moaned and sank to his knees as truth settled over him. Corsalis was right. He knew, had realized almost from the moment he had first dabbled in spells, that the external aspects were only that. Aspects. Words and gestures and paraphernalia were not the whole. To control such forces effectively, one's total being had to act in concert. No matter what the tongue spewed out, if the mind spoke differently, the result could only be disaster. And that was, Firan realized, with a wave of self-loathing, precisely what he had done. His tongue shouted imperiously,
Begone! Return to the netherworld from which we summoned you.
but his mind had been screaming even more loudly, "Save me! Send this horror to prey on another!" His terror-filled thoughts had been only of saving himself, no matter the cost. The cost now crouched, whimpering and terrified on the floor behind him. "Coward!" his mind screamed at him.
Help me!
Firan cried, grasping at Corsalis' arms.
Help my brother!
And Corsalis tried, first together with a trembling Firan. The Nairondes strengthened the shimmering wall of distortion, the barrier that would contain the creature. For now, the barrier would hold until the creature fully adapted to this alien world it found itself in, and regained the strength it had temporarily lost, by which time its grip on Eric would be total and irreversible. But neither of them possessed either the knowledge or the power to break the creature's hold on the boy, nor did their frantic search through Corsalis' jealously guarded tomes yield hope. And all the while, Eric's whimpers, growing more guttural by the minute, were like daggers in Firan's heart. His intermittent pleas to the boy to resist, to fight the creature's inexorably strengthening grasp, only exacerbated the self-loathing that held him in its grip, since he had realized his own weakness was responsible for his brother's plight.
Quintarius!
Firan exclaimed suddenly, wondering why the name was only now entering his mind.
We must fetch Quintarius! If any person can save Eric, it is he!
The name was a talisman, imbuing him with sudden hope.
No, no! What happens? I want to see what happens when Quintarius returns. You must tell me what happens, boy!
Firan, you're hurting me.
I'm sorry. I'm not sure what came over me. Take whatever rest you need before we start again. Please. I'm sorry.
No. It's fine. Oh shit, that's a lot. Fuck. Hand me one of those bottles.
Perhaps we should wait another day. You are not well.
Fuck, that's so gross. Look, Firan. If we keep stopping like that, we're not gonna get anywhere. I told you, this needs to happen. I will rest once this memory is fully complete, alright? I promise you. But we need to know what happens to Eric. What happens to you. Got it?
I understand, but don't think that makes this any easier.
You don't say. It's not like I'm the one bleeding or anything. Alright. Take my arm.
Let us continue then.
As Quintarius circled the grotesque form, studying it from all sides, Firan knelt on the floor just beyond the safety of the shifting grey, resisting the impulse to reach through and stroke the forehead. Already marked with a pattern of emerging scales.
Be brave, little brother.
He said softly.
I have brought Master Quintarius. He can surely remove this dreadful curse.
The only response was a bubbling noise, the sound a drowning reptile might make. The eyes, though, were still those of a terrified 12-year-old. As those eyes met Firan's, the younger boy's lips parted, revealing the beginnings of yellowing fangs, and sounds emerged. Not a snarl this time, nor a reptilian bubbling, but a guttural attempt at words.
I did not mean to fail you,
they said, at least to Firan's guilt-ridden mind.
It was not your failure, but mine.
Firan cried through a suddenly constricted throat.
I brought this upon you. You stood your ground as you were commanded.
Silence!
Quintarius snapped.
Such utterances are of no aid to your brother, or to anyone. Our only hope is to transport your brother to my sanctum, where my spells have great power, and where your father will not immediately come to search and interfere.
If you take him from within the shield...
With your help, the thing can be contained, for the brief time the transport will take. But you must guarantee that you will obey my every command without hesitation and with all your heart. If you fail, it could mean not only your brother's life, but ours as well.
I will do anything to undo what I have done.
Very well,
the sorcerer pointed.
Stand there, just touching the shield, and stand silently. Make not a sound while I...
Without warning, the door of the hut smashed open, almost knocked from its hinges. An instant later, a horde of uniformed guardsmen poured into the cramped room, Firan's father at their head. Quintarius had been right, Firan realized in horror. The enchantments to conceal their absence must have failed the moment he and Eric departed.
Blasphemer! Stealer of my sons!
Hermit and Zal'honan thundered, crashing into Quintarius, dealing the master a blow that sent the sorcerer sprawling. To Firan's horror, Quintarius's head struck the edge of the rough wooden table that had been shoved against the wall to make room for the summoning. With a muted cry, the wizard collapsed to the floor and lay as if dead, a trickle of blood spreading across the floor from his head.
Father!
Firan screamed.
You must not interfere.
Where is Eric?
The Earl demanded, his voice stentorian in the confines of the tiny room.
Where have you and your blasphemous friends taken your brother?
He is there.
Firan shouted back, pointing at the thing that still crouched beyond the shifting wall of gray. Its face was barely a face, covered with scales shadowing now from ash to black. Its bulging torso had already ripped the boy's tunic, which now hung in unrecognizable rags.
And Quintarius is the only one in this land who can save him.
Do not play me for a fool.
The Earl shouted, barely glancing at the creature his son had become.
Whatever it is, my men will make short work of it. Now, before I burn this hovel to the ground, tell me where...
With a guttural snarl, the thing plunged against the shield and fell back. But as it did, Firan noted with horror that the gray was lighter, closer to transparency than it had been when they had entered and Quintarius had strengthened it. And Eric... The change was accelerating. Already, the creature was Firan's size, and the scales that now fully covered its snouted, bestial face were glistening black. The fingers, merely bent to the shape of talons before, now were tipped with needle-sharp claws. Firan's eyes darted to Quintarius, who moaned but did not awaken. With the sorcerer unconscious, the spells he had renewed were failing. The Earl gestured to his men, and they reluctantly ringed the still snarling creature.
No, father,
Firan pleaded, then turned and dropped to his knees next to Quintarius, grasping the sorcerer's shoulders. He shook him violently.
Awake!
He shouted.
Awake!
The sorcerer stirred, but even as he did, the shield seemed to vanish completely. Swords drawn, the Earl's men advanced on the creature, but a moment later, as if caught in a sudden maelstrom, their bodies were whirled and twisted and sent crashing against the walls. Bleeding and broken, one impaled on his own sword. And still the change accelerated, the size of a grown man when the Earl's guards had drawn their swords. It was now nearly twice that, the remnant of Eric's clothes falling from its blackened, scaly body in shreds. And the face, it held now the demonic features Firan had glimpsed when the way had first been opened. Only in the eyes, only in the depths of the eyes did a trace of Eric remain. And now it advanced on the Earl, who backed away slowly, his blade held before him.
What? What is this abomination?
He asked, his voice shaking. Crimson-robed priest appeared in the door, but could only gape and stagger backward out of view. The Earl jabbed with his sword, but it was easily turned aside.
Eric!
Firan cried.
You cannot slay our father. You must resist. Until Quintarius awakens, you must resist.
The creature's eyes shifted to Firan and the fallen sorcerer, and it hesitated. It snarled, its fangs now inches long. It slashed the air with its talons, and the Earl lunged, swinging his blade with desperate strength. For an instant, it was as if time had wound to a sudden stop, the blade only inches from the creature's neck. For another instant, the eyes were not bloodshot red, but shimmering blue as they turned back toward the Earl. It bit into the scaly flesh, almost without slowing, as if in the grip of some magical power, not the grip of a mortal. The creature's head, its eyes still a shimmering blue, spun and crashed to the floor, spewing reddish-black blood in the air. The body stood for a full second before toppling. The Earl staggered backward against the wall amidst his fallen guards, his bloody sword dropping to his side. Quintarius lurched to his feet, his eyes still dazed but clearing. Too late, too late. The ripping sound that had nearly deafened Firan bare hours before came again, and the room was once more icy cold. Shadows swirled in the air, obscuring Firan's vision. The floor beneath the creature rippled and faded. For a moment, the opening was once again before him, and the creature vanished, and the shadows, and the icy cold. The rough wooden floor was once again whole, and Eric had returned. In numb disbelief, Firan beheld a sea of blood, now turning red, and the final spasms of his brother's true body, abandoned by the creature that had sought to possess it. The head, once again blonde and tussle-haired, lay where the creature had fallen. Its lips quivered, and a spark of awareness filled the boy's fast-dimming eyes. Awareness and forgiveness? Firan's throat constricted so tightly he could not breathe. Darkness clutched at his senses, and the room began to spin around him. The last sound he heard as the darkness and silence closed in was his father's scream of rage shaking the walls.
Okay, mission accomplished. I think...
Are you alright?
No, but sitting in Annika's lap will probably fix that. And probably a long rest. And Steve. Oh, and Mez. Definitely Mez. He's a good boy. Giant lizard man.
I'll try my best to look into ways to mitigate the pain as best I can, other than these elixirs of questionable worth, but my medical knowledge is not as apt as my magical acuity. Perhaps I could reach out to Dr. von Richten, and maybe he could send us some potions of higher quality. These potions you have here from Azalin are questionable, to say the least.
Sure. I guess. I'm not really in a writing state. I am in a talking state, though. Don't fucking think that... Oh, sorry for the cursing, but... Whew, lightheaded. We need to talk about that incident. Like, if this is to truly work, we need to unwind, unpack, analyze words. Come to me, please. Yes, so...
Are you sure we should be doing that right now with your current health state?
Yes, it's fresh on our minds, plus we still have so many more memories I feel we have to go through. So then, you were a very ambitious child. Do you know why from glimpsing into your past?
All I can recall is being chastised and berated for my use of magic. My father was quite a pious man, which slowly grew into my hatred of gods and my spurning for them.
I'm starting to see a cycle, I think. I have bad problems with my dad. Eric has problems with you. You have problems with Eric's dad and Eric. Do you think maybe, like, you could have talked with him? Like, I'm not gonna judge, right? Like, I wasn't there, and I can't see everything yet, mostly because of the blood loss. But perhaps doing a summoning of a greater demon was not the best choice of rebelling against your parents. I know some halflings and Ravalis would get a piercing on their ear or their nose, or wear rather gaudy clothing that, the halfling folk are very certain with their style, so, that kind of rebellion, but... Demon?
It was not supposed to be a rebellion. It was supposed to be a grand triumph, a proof of my magical capability, to put my father to shame. It was not supposed to end that way. Only my father acted with some level of restraint, Eric might still be here with us. Father, if I'm being entirely honest with you,
You say that was not a form of rebellion, but I'm going to say kind of sounded like it, and I can understand personally. A lot can happen with family. I've had a lot happen recently with you, with my mother, God's my other father, but still, it's important to know that at the end of the day, family is family, and we all have to make sure that their faults are accounted for, whether that be with reason, emotion, or what have you. I think your father had a lot of things going on in his life maybe you didn't know about. Maybe there was some stuff in his past. If you looked back and you saw how he grew up, I won't judge you for it. But I think the lesson here that should be learned is that perhaps a tad bit of restraint is needed. A bit of tact.
I would have hoped I learned this lesson by now, but I am certain as we look further into my past, that will become less certain.
Right. Well, guess what? We're gonna have to endure it together, like, what's the worst that could happen? I mean, just a little bit of blood loss here, a little blood loss there, and... Ow. Head. Anyway, could you, help me out of the room? I can't feel my legs right now.
Yes, of course. You don't even have to ask.
Viken? But I didn't call for you.
I smelled a lot of blood, so I figured I would check to see if there was an intruder I could have a snack on, or something seriously bad had happened. Unfortunately, neither. Do you need any help, Firan, dragging out the boy? I'll be fine, thank you, Viken. Sure. Anyway, the group was trying to come in and ask many laborious questions. Look, they... If you see them and they have little bumps or bruises, it was not me. It's not true. Anyway, I'm going to go out for a little flight. It's quite late now. You two were in there for hours.
Hours? Oh, no, I woke up so early to start this, and I wanted to go out and have a walk with Erebus.
The toad can wait. You're not going out like this.
But Firan has got that smug smile, and the forest just makes him less creepy somehow.
I do not care, Caden. No. Off to bed with you. Come on.
Fine. Annika! The toad will be coming to the room. You cannot debate this.